Welcome to Bridging Chicago, a podcast that aims to connect our listeners to Chicago's business, community, cultural, and charity leaders. Brought to you by SATC Solutions L3C. You can connect with us on Instagram or Twitter, where our handle is @BridgingChicago. For more information, including our email, visit us online at satcsolutions.com. Be sure to rate and subscribe to Bridging Chicago on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this podcast. Bridging Chicago.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Bridging Chicago podcast. This is Nathan, your host, and I'm joined today by Kevin Gillespie. He's the co-founder and president of Headline Solar, and I'm really excited to talk to you, Kevin, about Headline because I know I've looked into solar power before, but obviously even more so now that we got connected. And I mean, the future, well, this is kind of corny. The future does seem bright for solar, but I just realized as I was saying that, that's a bad pun. But it does.
Yeah, I mean, the future is bright, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to meet you and speak with you. Being a native Chicagoan, it's nice to connect with other people that are creative and doing things like this because we're a super creative city.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to put that out there. It's a fear of the unknown, and that's kind of how it is with solar. People see it as a fear of the unknown because they don't see it on everybody else's house. On everybody else's house, they see a front yard, they see a roof, they see everybody's got windows and a door, but not every house has solar on it. So there's an uncertainty that comes with that, and our biggest mission with Headline Solar, our sales process isn't like a pushy salesman coming to your door and in a slick suit and tie with a briefcase trying to sell you a used vehicle. We're trying to educate before we go to the next step, and that's a lot. Education is the most important thing with solar energy. You just don't see it in everybody's house, so people, it's an instant question: is this worth it? Is it valuable? And it's going to increase the value of your home. It's going to lower your bills and give you a more stable bill. That's what a lot of people don't see, and that's just a lot of the bridges to it. But one of the biggest things is how many jobs it brings and the growth potential, because we've already seen tremendous growth over the last 5 years, just over the last 2 years. You see year over year growth is incredible, and bringing more jobs to Illinois is incredibly important.
Yeah, and especially right now, that can seem like a tough task, but something that we definitely want to talk about is like how you're doing that in this environment. But let's take a step back and let's learn a little about you and about your past. I know that you said you're from Chicago here.
Yes.
It's awesome. We love having Chicago natives. We also know that neighborhoods are very important to Chicago.
The most important thing in Chicago.
Yeah. So tell us about your neighborhood growing up and what it was like for you. You grew up here.
Yeah, I grew up in Portage Park. I was just a couple blocks from Portage Park, and I grew up in a neighborhood with kids my age. My block had 5 other kids that were my age. 2 blocks over had another kid. 2 blocks up to another kid, and we all went to the same grade school. All of my best friends are kids that I met like in the neighborhood. We've been best friends since kindergarten. We still talk every day. So neighborhoods are important. It's one of the things that I don't think any other city has. I mean, they may have like a semblance of it or a small part of it, but our communities here in Chicago are huge, and even though they're huge, they're tight knit. Everybody in Portage Park, or in my part of Portage Park, knew each other. All the neighbors were checking up on each other, and everybody talks, and everybody congregates and gets together in the mornings and the afternoons. All the kids are out playing. I mean, we played kick the can every night in the summer. Going to school in the morning, we'd all get to one guy's house, and their parents would drop us off. It was really cool growing up in Chicago.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because you've been able to keep that, it sounds like, and that's something that has, like you were saying, you still have friends from there and you still talk to these guys all the time. So how do you think you were able to keep those bonds? Because a lot of times, you leave your neighborhood, you go to college, you start work, you start family, you do whatever, and it's really hard to keep those bonds with the people that you grew up with. So how have you all been able to do that, and stay close?
I mean, you have to want to keep those bonds. If it's got to be organic and it's got to be natural. We were originally friends because we were all the same size. You know, that's I think how everybody starts out. Is you start out as the same size, and then from there you can become more understanding of each other's nuances, and you can kind of all get the same. You start liking the same stuff, and if one guy comes through, with a new video game, then everybody's playing it. But we were able to maintain it because we wanted to. You meet a lot of people over the course of your life, and as you grow up, you get a lot of friends in high school and in college, new jobs. But keeping a core group, I don't want to say it's nostalgic, but it is at the same time. But everybody's got to grow, and as I've gone through and started businesses and had jobs and things like that, my circle has shrunk. It was these core group of guys that I grew up with, plus all the other friends that I've accumulated over the course of my life. And as I've grown, you start purposefully weeding out people that aren't on the same level or don't want to grow where you are. Everybody, stagnant people aren't going to help you, and you're not going to be able to benefit them either because they're not going to listen. And you can change, and everybody obviously does change. But again, you have to want to change, and you have to want to be better, and you have to want all these things. Otherwise, you're not going to force a square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't work.
Is that really hard to realize that someone isn't, that friendship with this person isn't something that is going to work, and not something that's worth like putting in that effort, because you just know that maybe they are a toxic energy, or they just don't, I don't want to say don't bring anything to the table, because I think everyone can in some way, but just that relationship between you and that person isn't going to work. Is that something that's really hard for you to sort of realize and then say like, hey, let's move on from here?
It used to be hard. The first time that you remove somebody that's, and like you said, you don't want to say that because they're not a benefit to you, but it's reciprocal. If I'm putting something out there and I'm not getting anything back, then it's not beneficial to either party. You can't always be a taker and never give something back. And yeah, the first time removing a negative person from my life, that was extremely difficult. But as I've gotten older, I'm 33 now. As I've gotten older and removed more and more negative people, it's become, it is what it is. It's a part of life.
Yeah.
You're going to have, you're going to have to get rid of some bad stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it's a person or it's, a pair of old shoes, it doesn't matter,
Or a bad habit.
Or a bad habit. Yeah.
Yeah. So after growing up here, did you then do the out of high school, go to college thing?
So after narrowly escaping St. Patrick High School on the northwest side of Chicago, I went to Northeastern, and then I ended up in California, and then I ended up back at Columbia, and then I went back to California, and went to Musicians Institute in California, came back to Chicago, went to Wright College after that, and then started going. I actually originally started my entrepreneurial type thing in 2010, 2011. I created a product for drums. I've been playing drums for the last 2.5 decades. And I created something, and I ended up bringing it to market and failed miserably at it. I think I sold 6 of them in Italy, which was cool, but didn't do what I was expecting it to do. So after that, I was trying out for the Illinois State Police Department of Corrections. I got screened out of that, and then I moved on to becoming a building engineer. And while I was a building engineer, I went to school for that. And And, after all these colleges that I've gone to and dropped out of, I still don't have a degree. I've got a lot of hours logged in school, but I have zero to show for it, except some receipts, but that's about it.
Yeah.
It just wasn't for me,
Yeah. And I think, in these times when people are realizing maybe going out and getting, $40,000 to $100,000 in debt to go to school, to get a job, to do something that you hope is even in your field, something that you think you might enjoy, but you're picking this thing at 18 years old, so who knows?
Right.
People are realizing that, you don't necessarily need to do it that way in order to find happiness and in order to provide for your family and do the things that you want to do. And so I think that is changing a little bit. But for you, I mean, at the time that you're doing all this, I think, other people that you grew up with were probably out, doing some of those things, going to school, getting a job, all those kind of things. So what was it like for you? Did you have troubles like comparing yourselves to other people, or like finding success when other people were doing these things that seemed to be successful? Or like, what was that like for you at that time, sort of doing something different?
Yeah, I mean, I've got two answers for this, right? There's a quote out there that I impart upon my children and anybody I ever talk to. Comparison is the thief of joy. If you're looking in your neighbor's bowl, trying to find out if they have more than you so that you can get more, then every time you get to their level, you're going to be disappointed because they're still ahead of you. So every time you're comparing even if you're hitting, I guess we'll call it a base hit. I'm not really a sports fan, but that's the only analogy I really ever use. Hitting a base hit may seem like a base hit to you because you're comparing it to somebody else's home run. But if you're hitting base hits and comparing it to nobody else, then you're still making progress.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at what you're doing, and winners aren't concerned about the other person's lane. You need to stay in your lane and focus on yourself. Otherwise, you're always going to be miserable, always wondering why everybody else has more than you when what you have should be enough. You should be looking in your neighbor's bowl to make sure they have enough, and that's it. And if they don't, you should be, trying to find a way to help them. And then, comparing yourselves to others and, everybody else's success, it's just going to hurt you. Everybody's trajectory is different. I've probably read it on different places, but there's like a timeline of success stories, and it's like J.K. Rowling didn't write her first book till she was 45 or whatever, and Colonel Sanders didn't get his recipe nailed down till he was 70. In the age of social media where everybody is putting out their best, you're not going to see what they're going through. You're not going to see struggle. You're not going to see hardship. No one's posting that they had the worst day of their life today, but they're going to post that they're going to post that home run, and you're not going to post your single base hit because you don't think it's worth it. But in reality, I mean, base hits add up. All that stuff adds up, and your timeline isn't going to match up with somebody else's. My best friend is a surgeon. When he was in school at Johns Hopkins, I wasn't concerned with what he was doing. I made sure that he was okay. I made sure that he was doing what he wanted to do because he always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't have the guts to do it. I always wanted to be safe and secure. But once I realized that safety and security was limiting me, then I was able to break free of that stuff and move on. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without my wife telling me. I came back from a trip and I said, I'm going to quit my job in 2 weeks. She said, no, you're quitting your job today. And that was it. That was, I didn't find any, success until I was, 25.
Yeah. And
that sounds odd to say until I was 25, but in this social media age, everybody, if you're not a millionaire by 19, or at least pretending to be one on Instagram, then you've failed miserably. And that's part of the the comparing yourself to others. It's just going to steal away all your joy. Somebody else's success is not to be compared to.
Yeah. There's a lot there that we could talk about, but I want to go back to two things. First, let's talk about what you shared about making sure that others had what they needed and making sure that others could, survive. And one of the things that I really enjoy hearing from people is about how they do that, how they, you know, t- what they think about social justice issues, and sort of how they help make sure that that everyone has their needs covered. And so for you, what does that look like for you? Like, what's really important to you in other people and making sure that they are cared for?
I've always been somebody that wanted to give back. I never had enough money to give back, but whenever I had money, I made sure that I was giving. If we were going out to eat with some friends, I'd pick up the bill. If it meant I was putting my account down to zero, that's cool, but I made sure that they were eating. Or if somebody wanted to, this is, years ago, we'd go to the bars. If somebody wanted to go out, but they didn't have any way to go out, they were broke, I'd take them out. And that was just what it was. Um, I'm not really a social justice. I'm not really in the loop of those things. I try as hard as I possibly can to never watch any news, because I think that, I'm not on any political spectrum. I've always been avoiding politics, because I think politicking puts you in a category and turns people that love you against you, and turns people that you love into enemies just because of a color that you choose. If you're choosing red or blue, or whoever you voted for, I think politicking just turns ugly automatically.
Yeah.
But you know, looking at, I avoid, like I said, I avoid all news, so I'm not really familiar with all the things that are going on all the time. But 2 years ago, we were at the mall picking up some stuff right before the Christmas season, and there was like a gifting table for underserved children, and I was with my son, and I took him over there and I showed him. I said, we've been extremely fortunate. All the things that we have in life were because of our choices, but some other people don't get the same choices that we get. And you're always a product of your environment, but sometimes your environment is, you can't dig your way out of a sand pit. Every time you get the shovel above your head, you're just putting yourself further down into it. So if you're again, this goes back to surrounding yourself with people that are going to better you. If you can't get out of where you're at, it's up to the people that can give to give. So we were going up to this gifting table, and they were asking for $1 or $2 to sponsor a gift, and we gave whatever we gave as much as we could. And I made sure my son was the person that handed over the money, because the point of having money, and the point of wealth, and then discovering what true wealth is to be able to give to people that are less fortunate, and to be able to help those that can't help themselves. And I just want to show him that it's important, and all the hours I put in, and all the work that I'm doing, and all the time that I'm away isn't just to get a bigger house or a faster car or more drum sets or more guitars. It's to be able to serve others. And I try to impart that upon him as much as I can, because he sees what I do.
Yeah.
And he watches, and kids don't forget. His life is only 5 years long. He remembers every single little detail.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to work at a summer camp, and I would tell our counselors that all the time. It's like, if you tell that kid, if you sit here and be good for this hour while we're in this thing, I'll give you candy when we get back to the cabin. You better have candy back at the cabin, because he will ask you for that when you get back there. So just keep that in mind, and because they kids are smarter than you think, and they remember a lot more than you think. So that's for sure. I'd like for you to share about you shared with us about this conversation with your wife about quitting your job, and not only supporting that, but saying, like, nope, that's going to happen today. And so for you, what is that partnership like, and why is it so important to find a partner who can be like, can not only come alongside you, but challenge you? And I guess, why is that important? And then, was that difficult to do for you, or did it kind of naturally happen where you have this sort of partnership with your wife?
So when we first met, we were both drunks. Whether we like to admit it or not. We were younger. I was 23, she was 21, and we were bar stars. We would go to the bars every night, spend every paycheck on having a good time. But she had her head on straight, and she was working very hard for herself, and she was well put together. I was picking up dog poop at a doggy daycare, and I wasn't focused on getting better. I was focused on staying the same, because the people I was surrounding myself with were staying the same, and they were fine with that. And I looked up to them because they're having a great time. They looked like they were having a great time, but I'm sure they were going to sleep at night wondering how the next day was going to go. And she always supported me. She always had my back. She's always had my back with everything that I've done. There's been times, that was that decision to do that wasn't like a 5-year long thought process, or a year long, or even a month long thing. It was, I went on this trip and came back and quit a job that was a very high paying job. I was a building engineer. It required a license. It required a lot of hours of training, and I was making more than enough to get by on. But it wasn't fulfilling. And when I did put in my notice, I was at a point. It was a tipping point where I had started another business, and I was getting more traction with that, and so I had basically replaced my income with my business that I was working on. So I was taking phone calls constantly at work, and the day that I turned in my notice, I had been on a phone call just before I had gotten there in the parking lot of a Kinko's, because I didn't own a printer, and that day was the start of a relationship with a client that paid me as much as my job paid me. So I was standing in the parking lot of this Kinko's with no money in my pocket, or whatever I had been making from my job, and I signed a contract with him that was replacing that income. So I was at Kinko's printing out my resignation, replacing my income in that same instance, and then going to work and putting in my resignation. And I remember handing my chief engineer my resignation, and he said, "Oh, hey, you finished your quizzing over the weekend." I said, "No, I'm quitting." He said, "I knew it," because everybody there had seen that I was doing other things, and I knew that there was other people in the building engineer community and the union that I was involved with that needed what I had.
Yeah.
And I wasn't directly robbing them of it, but I was taking a position, and I was in a spot where I had a really good shift. It takes guys years to get to that shift, and I had all these things, but somebody else needed it more than I did. So when I came back from that trip and I told my wife I was quitting in 2 weeks, and she said, "No, you're doing it today," I didn't have the confidence to do it. She had to tell me that it was the right thing to do. And there's fear, but all these decisions that I've made, they're not always 100% calculated. But if I can reverse engineer where I want to be and what steps it takes to get there, then I see the first couple steps are going to be hard, and we're going to be broke, and we're going to be struggling. But once the light at the end of the tunnel is within sight, that's when the real progress starts being made, and we can start moving toward that. But I wouldn't have taken that leap without my wife telling me to take it. She's always had my.
Yeah, and knowing all of that and sort of seeing how personal that is, I mean, to have a business fail, I imagine would be very difficult. And so, regardless of success or failure, do you feel like starting a business and then seeing what happens with it, is that a process that you have to like grieve a business that fails, or to celebrate one that is succeeding by also bringing other people into that? Is that a process where, I guess, when something fails, do you have to grieve that? Like, how do you deal with that?
It's just a lesson that needed to be learned. That's all. You can't, if you grieve it, you're gonna rest on that, and you're gonna sit on that, and it's always gonna be in the back of your mind. But if you take that failure as an experience and something that cost you time and money to learn, And it's the same thing as going to college. It's the same thing as doing whatever what everybody else's success story looks like. You know, every time someone's in a 4-year college, right? They have tests, they have quizzes, and they may fail a class, or they may have to redo something here and there. It's the same thing in business.
Yeah.
But taking the leap is the hardest part, because you truly don't know what's on the other side of it. But if you have a good support system around you, my wife is a massive supporter. My dad's always supported me. My mom, my stepmom, my mother-in-law and father-in-law always supported me. My friends, they'll talk a little bit of trash, but that's the motivation. Yeah. Everybody around me supports me, and if I didn't have those people, I wouldn't even touch this with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
Or touch any business business idea with a 10-foot pole.
I think it's awesome. When I was reading about your start and hearing that you created this drum thing, I thought, okay, is this like a drum, like engineer kind of drum, or is it like a drum? And I was like, oh, so you do drum, you are a drummer, which is awesome. Yeah. I think you definitely look the part. But I guess like having that creative side of you, does that help you in business and in entrepreneurship? Have you seen that sort of come up in different areas?
Absolutely. It's about being scrappy at the beginning. You'll always find a way when you're creative. And I can scratch my creative itch with advertising. That's one thing that that's how we started this business, with marketing first. So you can scratch a little bit of a creative itch with that. Obviously it doesn't satisfy, going out and playing drums in front of people, but it's helped us grow being creative. I watched some episodes of King of the Hill a long time ago, and I remember there was a character on King of the Hill that would get into a fight, and he would have sand in his pocket, and that was his leverage, right? Because he was a little wiry guy, and if he was fighting somebody, he'd pull the sand out of his pocket and throw it in their eyes, and that was his way to beat up the bigger guy. So as a business owner and as a creative person, you have to be super scrappy. And I think, being creative is like the sand in my pocket. The solar industry is behemoth. It's massive, but we can take what, our part of it, because there's enough for everybody. We can take our part of it by being creative and being scrappy and getting things done the way that we think they should be done. And that's all part of it, being scrappy and creative.
Huh. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, the sand in the pocket thing always throws people off. Sorry.
Yeah, I was like, no, it's a great analogy though, because like at first I was like, okay, well, I don't understand, but then that is, talking about your competitive edge. I think that puts it into a perspective that you can really understand, and you can see like everyone has something that is the sand in the pocket. You just have to figure out what yours is.
Right. Everybody has it. Every single person on earth has it. Yeah. But you have to believe in yourself, and you have to have people that support you, to tell you, your crazy idea, although it's crazy, it may work. So let's try it.
Yeah. I want to quickly talk about Wax and Wick.
Yes.
Because I actually grew up, my family, when I was growing up, owned a candle company.
Really?
And so they started in our basement. They started making candles, my mom and dad. And I remember I would come home and you would smell like brownies or apple pie, and just like, oh, it smells so good. I can't wait to eat that. And you realize, oh, they're making a hot fudge brownie candle downstairs. And so just so disappointing. But so that's really cool that you had that candle company. So what was that like for you? I mean, how did that come about? And then, why did you move on from there?
I mean, that business is still running. That business still does really well. It's pretty hands off. We have a great co-packer that we work with, and my business partner, he runs a lot of it right now while I'm building up Headline. But I was a trainee engineer. I was in the apprenticeship program as a building engineer, and I was making $15 an hour. And I was always trying to think of other ways to make more money, or other ways to get new skills and start new business ventures, because it's that was my entrepreneurial itch that I needed to scratch, but I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't take the leap. But I was sitting at I had a small writing desk, and I was sitting at it writing and typing away. And I had a candle that I'd bought from a big box store, and I was burning it, but I had it, for whatever reason, I had it either too close to the wall or I had it touching the wall. And when I extinguished the candle, I noticed that there was a big black soot mark up the wall. And I tried to clean it off, and it came off relatively easily, but I was like, there's got to be another way out out there to make a cleaner burning candle. So I started researching, and I noticed that all the candles that say that they're soy wax candles, they're typically or traditionally a blend of soy and paraffin wax. And they say soy on them because they have 10% of the wax is soy and then 90% is paraffin. That was creating like a toxic environment when you burn it, because paraffin wax is a byproduct of manufacturing tires and things like that. And I set out to make a 100% soy candle. And then I discovered wood wicks. There's another bigger brand out there I won't mention, but they use wood wicks. And I found a manufacturer for that and just started making candles in my kitchen. Well, my mom's kitchen with my wife. And we started going from there. And it was the first couple months was making it by hand, and we started getting more traction and getting more orders. And we were like, well, we really can't do this. This isn't going to work. And we found a co-packer in Illinois that does all of our manufacturing and shipping for us. We handcraft our own scents. We do all of it, except the manufacturing of it. That's something we just can't compete with. We're not. Yeah. I can't be using a double boiler in my house, keeping the candle glass warm, doing all the mixing, finding the flash points, making sure I don't mess that up, and then making dud candles when there's somebody that does it better than I do. And that's another important thing is, finding your strengths and running with them, but also finding people that are better at what your weaknesses are. And we just couldn't compete with it. So we've got that going, and we do well with the candles.
Awesome.
It's been I don't look like somebody that that makes candles, which is what makes it a lot in my mind. It makes it more comical, but yeah, it's been awesome.
Yeah. So kind of shifting over the manufacturing and distribution part of that has given you space to start Headline Solar now. And I mean, when you read about Headline Solar and you read about solar energy, it's one of those things I think that a lot of people would be like, yeah, I'd like to be able to do that. I'd like to be able to help the planet, save some money, still be able to, use my iPad at night. But I think because like you were saying earlier, because it's not out there, because you don't see it on all these roofs, because you don't hear about it all the time and all the advertisements as much as you do about, energy companies. It's one of those things that doesn't seem as possible to do, or it doesn't seem as easy to do. And after looking at Headline, you start to realize this is not only very feasible, but it's really the future. And it's really about, when are you going to get on board with this? Are you going to do it now or do it later when there's more companies doing it, more competition, probably, not as cost efficient to install it as it is with you guys right now?
Right now is the most cost efficient solar or renewable energy has been ever. 10 years ago, the cost of going solar was not only extremely expensive, but it wasn't nearly as technologically as advanced as it is now. We're seeing our flagship panel has 20, 30-year warranties on it. It has resistance against gigantic hail, and it has low degradation rates. Typical solar panels, their degradation rates over a 15-year period, you start to see that the panel will degrade down, or 25-year period where it'll degrade down about 15%. These panels are between 12.5% and 10%. and it's only going to get better over the next year. I think it's Moore's law, where every 18 months technology, the growth of technology doubles. So we're at a point now where the apex of the technology is at its highest. So a doubling in 18 months is going to be dramatically larger than the doubling over 18 months, 10 years ago. We were looking at larger panels with lower wattage 10 years ago, and doubling that made it half as large and twice as strong, but that twice as strong was still very low. And now we're seeing increases that are just astronomical. Efficiencies are going up, safety, the longevity, and most importantly, the efficiency that the panels are going up. And being able to connect people to the grid and be able to get that energy, that extra energy paid to for them to produce by the utilities is awesome. But also being able, like you said, being able to use your iPad at night, going with battery backup storage, it's still about as expensive as getting a gas generator. But again, you're looking at a much smaller carbon footprint than running a gas generator. And again, the technology is just getting better and better as we go through, as time passes. So people are considering battery backup storage. People are considering other, alternatives to the way that they want to produce their energy. And I think it's an amazing thing. But again, like you said, not everybody's seeing it on their roof. Not everybody's talking about it. When you get a new roof, you're not going to all your friends and saying how cool your new roof is. Nobody cares. You get your windows replaced. Again, you're not running to all your friends and family and saying, "Hey, my windows look a lot better than they used to." Everyone's like, "Cool, great." Again, nobody cares. But you go buy a new buy a new car, and everyone's got their eyes wide open for it. So as people are buying electric vehicles, I think that might be a gateway for people to understanding that renewable energies are the future, and the future is. This is as cliche as it gets, but the future is here.
Yeah.
The growth is going to be incredible over the next year.
So knowing this, as Headline Solar is expanding, what differentiates your company from others? I know you talked earlier about the selling points and saying, you obviously have to sell these things and
right.
People have to buy them and put them on the roofs. But how have you differentiated yourself, and what makes you more than just a company that sells solar panels and sticks them on someone's roof and walks away?
Yeah, we do a lot of in-house training. We have our own proprietary installation method that is monitored as the technicians are installing. We have great electricians on our crew. We have excellent pre-install operations processes. We've got industry veterans that work on our team, and our systems and processes are something that we've focused on right from the beginning. As a business owner, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So we're always trying to measure and improve what we're doing, and building a relationship with the customer, and being local to Illinois, I think has given us an advantage because I'm from here. I know how weird our weather is. I know how taxes are whatever they are. I refuse to look at it because it's only gone up. There's never been a, hey, we're going to give you back some money. But with the SREC program, the solar renewable energy credit program that Illinois was a part of with the Illinois Shines program, we were able to put money back in homeowners' pockets. There's another vote that's happening for that. I believe next month. I'd have to check on the date, but they're going to be, they're going to be extending the renewable energy credit program, and then there's the path to 100 that's still in progress. And these are all things that Illinois is finally thinking about and finally considering. Infrastructure is hugely important. I mean, I'm not sure where you live, but when I was growing up, I would drive up. My dad would drive me up and down Harlem Avenue if we were going somewhere, and I think Harlem Avenue was under construction for like 6 years. and then a lot of other streets are under construction for long amounts of time. So infrastructure improvement is going to kind of go hand in hand with the renewable energy movement here, because I think we can all take a lesson from what happened in Texas when they had their power outages. I mean, that was a week long dramatic event that affected however many people it affected. But we opened up in Houston. Well, the process started last year for Earth Day, but COVID really didn't help out with that. We weren't able to really travel down there and things like that. But we got our legs down there now, and we're starting to see that people want battery storage. They want to be able to know that if there is an infrastructure or a grid issue, that they can have the support from what they're producing to keep them online and keep them keep their AC on, or keep make sure they can use their microwave to eat, or their all the food in their fridge doesn't go bad.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a shift, but it's not this dramatic shift where one day it's this and tomorrow it's that. It's going to be a long process, but until people are talking about it more consistently, and people are being about it more consistently, then we're gonna be still relying on fossil fuels and relying on outdated infrastructure for not for development, but for transmission.
So what can you give us a couple of misconceptions that people have about solar energy, and kind of bust those myths that
Sure.
the common ones that you know?
Yeah, the one main one we always used to get was, it's going to look ugly on my roof. And our when we were selling, we would ask, what color is your neighbor's roof? And they never knew, because they were never looking at their neighbor's roof, and they weren't looking at their own roof. So a lot of people think that they're ugly and they're cumbersome on your roof, but the panels that we use are black on black on black. They're just gorgeous. They look sleek and make your house look like a robot. And I think they look gorgeous. I'm biased, obviously, but I think they look gorgeous. Another very common myth is that it's only going to power certain items in your home. That may be true with certain battery backup systems, but with solar, we're tying into your meter, or just after the meter, where it's being where the power is being fed to your main panel. So every circuit on that main panel is going to be served, and you'll be using your electricity based on what you produced from solar. Anything obviously after it gets dark, you're not going to be using the solar. But if you have battery backup, that's where that comes into play, and you can start storing energy and using it off peak times at night. Another huge misconception is that it's expensive. With the ability to finance it, and the cost of it is it's being driven down, not as a race to the bottom, but it's being driven down because of availability and manufacturing costs going down. And there's also government subsidies. We were blessed with the tax credit being extended, so that takes off. That's 26% of the cost of the system being wiped off your taxes. If you have tax liability, you can put that money in your pocket, that extra 26% of the system. Some states have energy incentives. Illinois had the solar renewable energy credit program. It's currently, unfortunately, in limbo right now, but we're expecting it to be voted through, and we're expecting it to be granted an extension, just because of how many jobs it's brought to Illinois, and how many solutions we've provided for people based on that. So the cost of, if you're looking at the combination of the renewable energy credit and the tax credit, you can see 50 to 55% of the cost of the system vanish just from that. And like I said, with the financing that's available, typically the cost of a system is roughly what you pay for your electric bill right now. So you're just taking one bill and replacing it. And instead of seeing your bill go up and down, you'll see a static solar payment. and that just replaces that bill. And those are the three big misconceptions that we normally see.
So knowing all.
I got one more.
Okay.
The other one is and this is I should have put this one first, but the biggest misconception is that if you go solar, it's going to power your house and you're going to have $0 bill. There's always going to be a transmission charge from the utility, and you're always going to have to rely on the grid for your off-peak usage. If you're using it at nighttime, then you're going to have to pay for it from the utility. But the misconception there is that when people say they've gone solar or they put solar on their roof, they're expecting solar to be powering their house 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can educate people as much as we possibly can, but helping somebody understand that in order for you to use your solar power, the sun has to be out. That's something that I think that's kind of, like way back, you should have figured out that if you're going to use solar, it's got to come from the sun.
Yeah.
But with the backup, the battery and the battery backup storage, that's when after hours you can use it and you won't be taking from the utility grid. And that's I think is the most important misconception.
Yeah.
People can think it's ugly all they want, but if they don't understand the standalone storage and then battery backup, that's what people I think have the hardest time understanding.
And so for people who have heard this and they've heard you talk about some of those myths and they've heard you share about, what you do as far as getting it on the roof and getting them energy, if they're thinking about if this is right for them, what would you say they should think about? What would you say they should look into or research or talk to someone about if they're thinking, okay, is this right for me to do in my house and with my family?
Absolutely. The question of is it right for me? I guess you have to, I think before we started, we talked about diving deeper into what motivates you as a person. And the biggest motivator for me in my life is my children and my wife. I do everything I do today, I know is going to have a direct effect on them in the future. So if I were a solar consumer and I was considering putting solar panels on my house to offset my electricity usage, I would be thinking about what the future looks like for my children and for the people that are coming after me. Because there has to be some selflessness in the things that we do. And if we look forward to a time when we're not alive here anymore and we're not able to see what impact we've made, then it doesn't feel like you're actually doing anything. But, I grew up in the 90s and I remember, everybody there. I mean, the ozone, right? We've depleted our ozone. We're experiencing, greenhouse gases. We're experiencing increased temperatures year over year. And I don't want my children to live or grow up in some sort of, wasteland.
Yeah.
And I want to see fossil fuels. I don't want to see them go away. I still love driving my gas powered vehicle because it's what I'm used to. But I mean, who knows what the future is going to bring for that? I mean, I think that there was talks about the big car manufacturers getting rid of creating new gas powered vehicles within the next decade or sooner. And I implore somebody that's on the fence or wondering about how this is going to, if this is something they should be doing, I implore them to think about the future. Mm-hmm. And just think about it from a standpoint of maybe somebody thought about me when they were making their plans and making their choices. Maybe somebody else was thinking about me, so I should be thinking about somebody else. Because, like I said, it may not affect your immediate timeline, but you'll see your bill go down, and you'll maybe feel better because you're emitting, you're replacing CO2 usage or CO2. You're replacing the CO2 emissions. I'm sorry about that, and reducing your carbon footprint. you may see that immediately, but our future is all our kids have, and it's all the people that come after us have. So I would implore somebody to think about what's next and how this can impact the environment and impact the future.
Yeah, yeah, it's really important, and I think it's really important that people do hear that and consider that and decide what it is that they want. If there's an option out there that's feasible, considering what it is you want for the future, I think you have to make some moves now, and you can't wait for the future, because then it's like you said, you're going to be pushing it out so far that not only are you never really going to see the effects of it, but maybe it's not going to have an effect for your kids early enough for them to be able to go out and play on the playground and breathe clean air all the time, and just be able to have the kind of lives that you want them to have without having as many health issues and all the other things that come with not having clean air available for everyone.
Right. I mean, I couldn't imagine growing up in the 70s when we were having all those, the gas crisis, and there was, smog, and, other countries were experiencing, complete sky coverage from,
Hmm.
from factories and from being so densely populated. Everyone's driving their car. Everyone's emitting, these noxious and toxic fumes into the air. I mean, I don't know if you can imagine this, but could you imagine going outside on a sunny day, or what was supposed to be a sunny day, and only seeing like a hazy, pastel colored sun instead of a beautiful bright yellow sun, again, against a blue backdrop with, clouds rolling by and dissipating, and just being this, it's so dystopian to think about that, because we were handed the earth. This isn't something that, we didn't build this thing. I mean, maybe we did. I don't know. Again, I'm not going to speculate on that. That might be some alien stuff or some some religion stuff I'm not going to get into. But we were handed something, and we're gonna go with ebbs and flows, where we're like our own worst enemy. We want to build and build and build, but in the meantime, we're destroying things that were here long before us. And I'm not on either side of the fence of it, but we certainly have to think further out than today. Today is, I mean, it's 11 o'clock. Today's gone, in my opinion. There's a couple more hours left of the day, but everybody that's been up since the sun came up, your day's already. If you haven't gotten your locomotion by now, then you might as well just pack it up. But today's gone. Tomorrow is what we need to look forward to in 30 years and 60 and 100 years from now.
Yeah. Great points. Kevin, I want to thank you for joining us today. I learned a lot, but I mean, you're obviously very motivated, and that motivation is, I think, turning into inspiration for other people. And so I hope that everyone enjoyed this episode. I'm sure they did. I know I did. So I want to thank you for joining us today and for giving your thoughts on not just solar energy, but really that drive, that's within you, that I think is, as you were saying, everyone has something.
Yeah.
So kind of keying into that and figuring out how can you use that to better whatever you want to do, whether it's, there is social justice work, or it's, entrepreneurship, or, you're an accountant and you go crunch numbers for a company. I think it all is important. And being able to do that in your own creative way is also really important. So thanks for sharing all those things.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And it was absolutely a pleasure.
Great. Well, we obviously want to thank our listeners. We're always grateful for you listening and interacting with us. You can do that by searching Bridging Chicago anywhere: YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then, of course, our website is bridgingchicago.com. And Kevin, as we leave, I'd like for you to share where people can find you. And if they want to learn more about solar energy or about you and what you've done, can you give us the handles as it is for all the places we can find Headline Solar?
Yeah, you can find Headline Solar at www.headlinesolar.com. All of our social media handles are at Headline Solar or Headline_Solar. You can find me, working, trying to get the environment to the next level and trying to get people, educated about the benefits of going solar, and that's where you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time. We do appreciate it, and we know it's precious, so we'll let you go. But thanks for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to another episode with you of the Bridging Chicago podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bridging Chicago, as produced by the SATC Solutions Center. Nothing contained in this podcast shall constitute financial, investment, legal, and/or professional advice. No professional relationship of any kind is created between you and the podcast host or guest. You are urged to speak with your financial, investment, or legal advisors before making any investment or legal decisions. Furthermore, the opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the opinions of SATC Solutions Center, SATC Law, or any of its employees. This podcast is created by the hosts and guests' individual capacities. All opinions on this podcast are or have been rendered based on specific facts, under certain conditions, and are subject to certain assumptions and may not and should not be used or relied upon for any other purpose, including, but not limited to, or use in or in connection with any investment purposes or legal proceeding.